Hi everyone, welcome to the first official lecture video for English Comp 2 in the summer section. So obviously if you've watched the intro to the class and the just my intro video and everything like that, you should be familiar that this is how I do things. I tend to do a video and going over the important pieces of information. In the intro to the class video, I did talk about the PowerPoint presentations and how they are the notes. So this is the lecture where I go over those notes in particular. So, brief reminder, the only homework for this week is journal entry number 1, and to read the content for next week. That will be going up, like I originally said, Thursday usually is when I make the next week's readings available. That being said, hi. So let's talk about research, because as we kind of mentioned in the syllabus overview of the course, this class is all about writing a research paper. And I want to emphasize, research paper, what we're talking about is an academic research paper. If you plan on going on to any further academic pursuits, so if you go to a 4-year institution to get a bachelor's, go on to any further colleges, research paper is one of the core bread and butter assignments of traditional higher education. So it's important to know how to do these things. I would definitely say that while it is not always applicable to going out into the job world, not every career requires you to do research. Some of the tools and techniques that we talk about in the research process and in the writing process are things that are applicable to other careers and other more technical jobs. So I do want to emphasize it's not like this course has no application. It's just a matter of its primary application is for higher education, but it can be used in other ways. And so that's really what we're talking about. So what is research? And quite literally, it's finding out about something. And that's where I say, truly, research is something that anyone can do at any time. It's one of those, some people like to gatekeep it. I like to be honest and say anyone can do research. It's a matter of what kind of research you're doing and the quality of research, but anyone can do it. And in fact, a lot of people do it every day. We just don't necessarily refer to it as research. So if it's quite literally finding out about something, the things that we can see that count as research are things like finding facts, information, and or data. Just simply gathering pieces of information is part of the process of research. So whether you are conducting research for a big study that you're performing, or you're just doing research on a job that you're applying to, or you're doing research into best practices for potty training your 2.5-year-old who you're trying to get out of diapers sooner rather than later. Like, you're going to look up stuff. So research, it's finding out the information. What's important to note, and I want to emphasize that, is that this can be professional or casual. Yes, some of my examples are a little more casual, but at the same time, research can be done as a professional career, as a professional job, and a component. There is types of professional research that is done, but there's also casual research. I would argue if you've ever looked up something on Google because you weren't sure, you were doing casual research. If you've ever referred to a Wikipedia article because you wanted to know about something, you were doing casual research. If you ever sat down and figured out you're going to try testing something and you're going to see if it works or not, and then you perform it multiple times and see, collect the data of whether or not it worked or not, you were doing professional research. That's my nice little joke aside in saying that, anyone can do professional or casual research. It really just comes down to what is the purpose behind it and how you go about it. And I will tell you this, one thing that is important with research is relevancy. Oftentimes when we're looking for information, we want to find things that are relevant. We can find a lot of things that have no impact or importance on something. Sometimes we find information that hasn't been tested or discovered or even talked about in 40, 50, 60 years. So relevancy is important when it comes to research. So I am going to ask you to remember that component when it comes time for your research project, is the relevancy component. So overall, the goal of research is to increase knowledge. That's it, plain and simple. We want to increase knowledge. The better question is, how do we do that? And so obviously the short answer and the smart aleck answer is, we do research. Yes, you're right. That is how we do it. But the question is, how do we do research? How do we increase our knowledge? And this is where I normally in a in-person class, I would ask everyone to just, tell me, what do you think research is? And this is actually a list of things that people have said in class, as well as things that I have added to make sure that things aren't missed. So how do we do research? This is where I'm going to tell you right now, there is no one right way to do research. So if somebody tells you the only way to do research is, and then they tell you an answer, they're immediately wrong. There is no one right way to do research. In science fields, there's the research method. It's a way to follow doing your research. That's not saying that that's the only way to do research. It's saying that that is the way to test a hypothesis. So there's no one right way to do research. Depending on what you're trying to find and how you're trying to get it, there might be many different ways. And so some of them I've already mentioned, like Google and Wikipedia. But truly, when we talk about research from a classroom standpoint, from an English Comp 2 standpoint, and I want to re-emphasize this very specifically. This is English Composition 2. This is a 100 level course. Yes, I'm an English teacher. Yes, I'm teaching you research paper. Do I expect you to write me a master's level research dissertation thesis? No. That is not what I'm looking for. I am looking for you to conduct some research into a subject and to discuss it. That's what I'm looking for. So how do you research? Well, that's going to come down to you. But we can use things like Google. We can use the library. Both, we can use e-libraries. We can use our physical library in our current area, whether we're in Erie City proper or we're in somewhere like Meadville. Like, use your local library. You can use other libraries, Wikipedia. You can use YouTube. YouTube has a lot of really good information. Yes, there's issues about that, but for the most part, there's equal parts videos that are pointless and full of just entertainment, but videos that teach lessons and lectures and things like that. There's articles that can be journal articles, that can be professional articles, that can be periodical articles, that can be, I was going to say Vogue Top 50. It can be anything like that. It can be books. It can be databases, which are professional settings that have, designated subject area readings and things like that. It can be talking to people. It can be conducting interviews. It can be conducting surveys. People are a source of research. You can find out what people think about something by simply talking to them. It can be music. Music is actually a really good way to figure out what a culture is, what's important in a culture at a given time, is looking at what is the popular music of the time. Same with movies. Movies are a great way to see what is the main thing in an era at a time in history. It's a weird thing to kind of look into. Video games can be research. Board games can be research. Tweets, online posts, blogs. This is why I said there's no one right way to do research. The things that count as research is exactly what we said. Finding out about something. Increase your knowledge. If you increase your knowledge by reading online posts from someone, if you wanted to do a research paper on why conspiracy theories are so appealing to conservative Christians, I've seen a couple YouTube videos show up about it. That's the only reason why I'm thinking about it. But if that's what you want to look up, there's YouTube videos to look up. You can look at conservative Christian blogs. You can look at conspiracy theory blogs. And those are the ways that you gather the research. When we usually say research, a lot of times people think it's spending hours in the library looking at old books. That's one way to do research, but that's not the only way. And in fact, I'll tell you right now, in this class, I hope that you use multiple methods to do research. You shouldn't limit yourself to one. Engage in many different kinds. Because the more ways you engage with it, the more robust your information is going to be. I'd argue the more accurate it's probably going to be. And I think it's going to give you a better paper overall. And that's just my opinion. So, how do we actually do this? Because this is just giving you ideas of where to look, but how do we actually do it? Well, we can break it down. So very specifically, when we say break it down, I mean if we figure out a topic that we want to do, we need to break it down a little bit. And so we can do this with what's known as a KWL chart. And that's a know, want to know, and learn chart. And so we break it down into those three categories: what we know, what we want to know, and what we learned. And this is actually a really good method and strategy for starting with research. After you've picked a topic, which we'll talk about topics here in a little bit, but once you've picked a topic, literally just start listing everything you know about the topic. Don't look it up. Just write down, note down, type it. I don't care how you do it, but mark down everything you already know about the subject. A lot of times people don't realize just how much they know about their subject already. Start with that. And then once you've listed out all those things, write down what you want to know. What are some questions that are important to you? What are things that you're not quite sure about? When you can ask those questions, that gives you an idea of what you're going to be actually researching. Because that's the point. The KWL chart is all about how to start your research. You already have everything you know, and you have this list of things you want to know. Now you're looking for that. And then that last column, the what we learned, the KWL chart, the what we learned, that's what you've found in your research. That's what becomes your paper, is combining all those three things together to create this overarching, hey, this is the subject. This is what I already knew about it, and I can support with facts. And here's what I learned about it because I wasn't sure about this. And sometimes when we are researching things, when we look into it, we find things that we didn't even know we wanted to know about, and things that we never even knew about. So that's the beauty of it. And it's why I say research is not just something that you do once, and it's not something that you only do in school. A lot of people, this might be my own bias as a teacher, but people like to learn. They don't always like to learn school, because school can be redundant and boring and frustrating at times. But people genuinely like to learn. It's usually things they want to know more about. So I encourage that. And so in this process as well, not just with the KWL chart, but when we begin researching, when we begin thinking about what we're going to do our projects on, it can be overwhelming. And so sometimes a good way to start, especially the what we know for the KWL chart, and what we just kind of want to figure out, what we need to figure out, it's good to ask the important questions. The 5 W's and 1 H. The who, what, when, where, why, and how. I've talked about this in different classes before, so if you've had me in, let's say, English Comp 1 or a couple of the different criminal justice classes, I've talked about this before, that when interviewing someone, when talking to them, or when evaluating information, we want to ask who is involved, what happened, when did it happen, where did it happen, why did it happen, and how did it happen. Those questions are the basis for almost everything that we do as far as asking questions. They all usually fit within one of them. So I highly encourage you to ask those questions as you go through. And so, with that being said, we need to talk about research questions. And don't think the 5 W's and 1 H questions were enough. They're just the start. Because this is something that is going to come up, and it is part of your overall research is you need a research question. Okay? And I do want to emphasize, a research question isn't just, why is the sky this color? Why do fish swim? It's not a simple it's not usually a simple question with a simple answer. They're usually complex. And so what we like to say is a research question will do the following things. And you can see I have 4 things listed here. A research question will make people engage in the material. A research question can be objectively argued. A research question can have more than one correct answer. And a research question can, quite obviously, can be researched. So what do I mean by that? So the first thing, a research question makes people engage in the material. A good research question will open up debate. When people want to engage in the conversation, when people want to talk about the question and talk about the answer and the outcomes, that's a good sign of a good research question. Another sign of a good research question is the fact that even if they disagree with your answer, they can still make a good faith, honest argument about it. A good research question is meant to not be an end-all, be-all answer. It's meant to be, the next step. It's meant to be opening up to what can be. So it should be objectively argued. And because of that, it means it has more than one correct answer. If your answer to a research question that you find is a yes or no question, it's not a good research question. If it's a yes but or a no but, it's potentially a good research question, because it means there's more than one answer. We always want that. And I know that seems weird, because isn't the whole point of a research project to prove a point? Kind of. It really is. But we'll talk about that later, trust me. And like I said, it needs to be able to be researched. It can be researched. Again, it's not one of those, the sky is blue is my answer. How do I know? I can look up and see the sky is blue. That's not really being researched. Now, if you want to talk about the chemical reactions in the atmosphere and the water and how light refracts and reflects and get into all that, that's still science, and that's still answering a research question, but it's a straightforward one correct answer, so it doesn't quite fit. And don't worry, we will talk way more about research later. So after you've done the research and asked a research question, you will create a thesis statement. And all a thesis statement is the answer to the research question. And I'm going to tell you this right now, we are going to talk way more about thesis statement, not today, but we're going to talk about it later, okay? But keep that in mind. So, doing research as a brief overview. And this is honestly what I suggest to everyone starting off. And that is, have questions you want answered. Once you've figured out a topic, truly, I just want you to list any questions you have about your topic. List them out, even if you don't share them with anyone. Write down every question you can possibly think of about it. And don't be super serious about it. Don't think that you have to have 10 questions or you're not. No. Just do as many as you can and be open to writing down more, because honestly, the more questions you have, the more information you're going to be able to find. When you're doing research, I will repeat this over and over for you. Look for a wide variety of sources of information. Don't get focused on chasing a unicorn source. It's a term I use. A unicorn source is that perfect one source of information that has the answer to everything you're looking for. It is oftentimes not there. It can be in some subjects, in some cases, but you will waste more time looking for it than if you just gather a wide variety of sources that you can gather your information from. I will always recommend more sources than looking for that perfect one. This is a general rule and something that I tell students all the time. Learn to skim for important information because you will waste more time reading sources that are useless. So learn to skim for the important information and then read deeper on sources that are important. And then I also say practice effective reading and critical thinking. And effective reading is fairly easy. It's reading with a pen or pencil ready to take notes. It's quick analysis, things like looking for repetition. And it's being able to connect with the author, finding out what the author is trying to get forward and deliver to you. And then critical thinking, I don't think I really need to dive into, but critical thinking means approaching things with not necessarily skepticism, but being willing to ask questions like, where does that information come from? How do I know that this is valid? Where is the credibility? Who said this? If you've had me for English Comp 1, you'll know Tappick and Kelp. For those of you who have not had me, the rhetorical situation, you will know what Tappick and Kelp are soon enough. That's critical thinking. So, one thing that we do need to talk about is research versus source-based. Because there is a problem in general higher ed where we refer to it as research when in reality it's source-based arguments. And that's not really what we're talking about. And so I want to identify briefly the difference between a research-based or a research versus source-based argument. So research is about finding information for a question you don't know the answer to. That's why we say we start with a research question. What is it do you want to know? How are you going to find this information? What is the question that you are trying to ask? Source-based is where you already have the answer, but now you're just looking for support. I want to emphasize this. Research is finding information for a question you don't know the answer to, and source-based is having the answer and looking for support. Please note, both look for information, but their motivations and purposes are different. If I asked you to do a source-based argument, I would be telling you, okay, you already have your answer, now find information that supports your claim. What I'm asking for you to do is to ask a question that you don't know the answer to. I want you to ask a question. I want you to figure out what the heck you're going to be doing. What is it you want to know? And then look up that information. Try to find the answer to your question. And I'll be honest, for some of you, it might mean that your question doesn't have an answer, and that's okay. It's okay if your question does not have a direct answer. But I still want you to try. And so, I believe the next slide, is going over the essay that I had for reading for week 1. Like I said, this first lecture I'm giving you all the information up front. The next one, I'm expecting you to read the readings for week 2. And then as we discuss this, they should be familiar to you. This one, because it's just introduction, is okay. You didn't need to necessarily read it, but I want to talk about Essay 13 as well. But before I get to that, I want to talk about the semester-long research paper, because that is the big focus. And like I said, each assignment sheet will have its own video talking about it, but I want to start now with this. The research paper that you will write for this class, every assignment you will write is going to be related to your topic. I want you to pick a topic and stick to a topic for the whole 8 weeks. You've plenty of time to figure out that now. You still have another 2 weeks to figure out what you want to do. But this is where I encourage you to think about journal entry 1. And I also want you to think about a couple other things. The subject of your essay, of your research, is your choice. I don't have many guidelines for what topics are not approved, because I think most topics, most arguments can be researched, not just source-based arguments. Okay? So that being said, I encourage you, think about something you care really deeply about. If you care really deeply about politics, okay, think about something in politics that you would like to research, that you would like to learn more about, and find information to a question that you don't know the answer to, that you can't just simply Google and it tells you the answer. Something you're going to have to dig deeper into. If your passion is geology and you want to learn about how certain rock sediments form and things like that, okay, that's something you can research. If you're really into cooking strategies and how professional chefs develop signature styles and dishes, that's something you can research. If you're really passionate about video games, you can talk, like, it doesn't matter what information, what subject, what area you're interested in. It is likely that there is something there that you could do a research essay on. And that's one of the biggest things that I try to encourage for you. Pick a subject you care about. So, again, you don't have to have a topic picked this week at all. But I want you to think about, what are you passionate about? What do you really love? What do you care about? What is something that, in polite company of friends that rag on each other and are totally harsh, do you just go off and talk nonstop about, and your friends are like, oh God, please stop? What are you passionate about? What do you really want to do? Because that, I would argue, is what you should choose as your topic. Because you're probably going to get a fantastic paper. And this is where I'll say, going forward, I will share previous students' research papers, minus their personal information, but I want you to be able to see what you can do this subject on, okay? So we'll talk about them, we'll look at some of them, so that you get an idea of what you can do. And we'll look at it throughout the process, so that you're not just, seeing the final product. I'll show you how students develop their assignments over time. Okay? So, that being said, I want to talk about the essays I have you reading from the 88 open essays. So, first and foremost, if you took English Comp 1, which you should have here while you're in this class, all of these are professional essays about different subjects. And the reason we look at them here in this class in particular is I use each one of them as an example of the process of research and what we're doing. So the very first one is the plot to privatize common knowledge. And if you read through the entire thing, it's a little bit older now, simply because the last couple years a lot has changed on this. But when this came out, there was a whole larger conversation about copyright and intellectual property. And so things to consider when you're reading these essays, not necessarily this one, but I do encourage you to do that with this information available to you, is for future ones to think about some important aspects. So what is this essay really about? And the essay is about the, like I said, it's a little bit older, so the, quote, current state of intellectual property, the rights to them, and how they affect you. So they talk about things like the Boy Scouts, what kind of campfire songs they're legally allowed to sing, which you might think, why is that even a problem? Exactly. It's things like referring to Bridezilla, which Godzilla is a trademarked in Japan thing. The essay itself also refers to Barbie and Mattel and things like that, which I'll argue right now, if you've been paying attention for the last 5-10 years, these same arguments are still happening and we're seeing them again show up. So the whole copyright issue, Disney fighting the copyrights to keep Mickey Mouse and whatnot, even though Steamboat Willie entered the public domain last year, I believe. And Winnie the Pooh from A.A. Milne and whatnot entering the public domain. So we have issues of public domain versus copyright material. In the modern era of YouTube, copyright claims happen a lot. There was another one that I was thinking of. It was related to, not Godzilla. Now I remember. If you know anything about video games, there's been an ongoing legal battle. Yes, it's still ongoing, even if you haven't heard much about it, between Pal World. I think the company that owns is Pocket Pair or whatever it's called. They've been in a constant legal battle with Nintendo and Game Freak over Pokemon. Like, this is a real thing that's still happening, and there's a legitimate argument happening about intellectual property rights because Pokemon is suing for, the monster capturing mechanic and things like that Pal World did, which, can you copyright something that is a common component of other RPGs? And so it's a whole thing. That's why I said, legitimately, this is an article that, despite being a little bit older, is still valid and accurate and has a lot of the same issues still happening today. So it's worth noting that. So what sort of research does our author do? And so if you read through, and I encourage you to read through essay number 13, because I'm talking about it like this, and like I said, all the future lecture videos, I'll be talking about the readings the same way, but with the expectation that you've read through the essay. So I encourage you to read through essay 13 with this in mind. What sort of research does our author do? Well, they gather stories about copyright problems. Most of them were publicly available at the time. Talking about historical court cases and legislation. They talked about reviews other books on the subject have made. They cover different material. Notice, they did research. They gathered stories publicly available, so that means Google, using the internet, using Wikipedia, using the library. Historical court cases and legislation, that definitely requires a little bit of digging, but you can find it. Reviews other books on the subject, so they were using books. This is what I mean. Research is not a one-size-fits-all thing. It's very robust, and it lets you do so much more. How does the author connect with the general audience? Well, they attempt to make it as broad-reaching as possible so everyone can relate. They don't just talk about copyright for a song. They talk about copyright with a logo, with a brand name, with a term, that's the whole point. If you try to be as broad as possible, you can reach, hopefully, the most people. And usually, if this was in person, I would ask this question directly to you, but I want you to consider this every essay that you read for this class. What can you learn from reading this essay? Okay? And that's where I say, I promise you, every essay that I have picked is for a reason. And so this particular essay is one way that research can be used and produced. So, like I said, the second question, what sort of research does our author do? What I want you to gain from reading essay 13 is to see that, well, you can actually get a lot of research by talking to people and looking up just publicly available information. And then the way that they disseminate that information, the way that they take it and talk about it to share with other people. That's what I want you to get from this. So that's why I say every essay is meant to teach you something. It's almost always connected to the direct lesson that it's connected to. That's it. That's what we have for our very first lecture for English Comp 2. So, as I said before, the only homework for this week, and I'll switch to the black slide so that way if you're skimming through the video, you know to look for this. So, your homework, like I said, is to read the stuff for week 2 and to finish journal entry 1. And I also will encourage you, it's not an assignment, you don't have to turn it in, there's no points for it, but I encourage you to start thinking about what you might want to do your research paper on. Remember, I'm asking you to pick one topic that you're going to stick to for the whole semester. All 8 weeks. So think about what you want to write about, think about what you're interested in, and I encourage you to honestly pick something you're passionate about. That being said, thank you very much. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next video.